All right, welcome to the show, everyone. My guest today is Dan Martell. He's a Canadian entrepreneur and investor with an interesting story. Dan had a challenging upbringing, and at age 15, he went to jail, and at age 17, he spent 11 months in rehab. It was during this time he discovered computer programming, becoming fascinated in starting and growing software businesses, and his life took a positive turn. He made his first million by age 27, founded 5 companies and successfully exited 3 of them. He's invested in over 40 startups, raised money from Mark Cuban, and even spent a week with Richard Branson. Today he's an authority on building and scaling SaaS businesses. He's advised some companies you'll recognize like Intercom, Hootsuite, and Udemy, and has spoken around the world and to MBA classes at Berkeley and Stanford. I want to bring Dan on the show to find out how he went from jail time to building and advising successful companies, how he thinks about business in general, and what's next for him. So Dan, welcome to the show.
James, thanks for having me, man. As I mentioned, I'm going to apologize for any background noise. I have somebody coming over to grab one of my cars, and it makes a lot of noise when it starts, so I apologize. But I'm here 100% and really excited to be on the show.
Awesome. And that kind of keeps it interesting, I guess, so that's totally fine. So I think a lot of entrepreneurs seem to have a bit of a chaotic past. It seems to be a bit of a common thread, and it sounds like that was the case for you. So I was hoping you could just share a bit about your story, how you grew up, and how you actually ended up in rehab at age 17.
You can tell us. Yeah. I mean, I grew up in a family of 4, so I'm the second oldest. My mom was an alcoholic. My dad was on the road, not really home very often. He was in sales, and I just found myself with a lot of time on my hands. I grew up in a fairly middle-class environment, but at a young age, I started to act a little different than the rest of the kids, and I got diagnosed with ADHD when I was 8 or 9, put on prescription drugs when I was 11, and always felt, I guess, just like a little broken, a little different. And I acted out at home quite a bit, ended up in foster care just because my parents couldn't handle me anymore. I used to have a severe anger issue. And, long story short, crisis center, group homes, foster care, went through the system, discovered drugs when I was 13, ended up spending time with people twice my age, learning things I definitely should have been learning as a teenager. And when I was 15, I got sentenced for drug-related charges. Spent 2 months in juvenile detention, got out, promised I was going to clean up my life. I definitely had a drinking and alcohol problem or a drug problem at the time, and I lasted about a day. And pretty much my life after that point spun out of control. Fast forward a year and a half, I'm 16. High on drugs, driving a stolen car, and pull over off the highway real quick to get some gas, and there's a routine roadblock. And I slowed down. Cops asked me for driver's registration. I said it was my mom's car. I didn't have my driver's license on me, and as soon as he asked me to pull over, I took off. And, having been to jail prior and just the state I was in, the police were actually looking for me for some other related issues. And I just decided that if the cops ever caught me, I was gonna pull. I had a handgun in a bag sitting next to me in the car, and I just said if anybody ever caught me, I was just gonna pull the gun and let the police do their jobs. And I came around the corner in this neighborhood trying to get away from the police. There was an open garage door. I thought I could get in it and kind of hide out, and ended up smashing in the side of the house, going really fast. Went to reach for the gun, kept pulling on it, got stuck, pulling on it, and before I knew it, the door opened and the police grabbed me, and my feet didn't touch the ground, threw me in the back of the cop car, and I woke up the next day sober, wondering what my life was going to look like. So it was a crazy time, man. One part of me, I was frustrated that I'd failed to do what I said I was going to do. The other part made me realize that maybe somebody was looking out for me, and there was a reason why I was still alive. And I didn't know what my life was going to look like. I ended up going to court. Got sentenced, I believe, for 16 months in jail. I ended up getting sentenced to an adult jail for the severity of my crimes. And Ended up doing about 5 months there before getting released to a rehab center called Portage. And it was really there where I transformed my life. It was an 11-month program. I learned to kind of, understand what made me tick, why I was so angry, why I had an addiction issue. I got to understand my story, my belief systems, and really work on myself. And it was through that process of just really this ultimate personal development program as a 17-year-old that I really kind of grew into the person who could even succeed in life, right? And it was at the end of that program where I was helping Rick, one of the maintenance guys, clean out this cabin where we found this old 486 computer with a book on Java programming sitting next to it. And I just opened it up and I was like, well, if this is computer programming, then this is not crazy because it like reads like English. And I started the computer and typed in the terminal window, all the, the first chapter in the book. And I got the computer to say, hello world, which it may not sound like a big deal, but I mean, for a guy that's never touched a computer, I felt like a genius. And, that became my new addiction. I got out, I discovered a thing called the internet. Turned out to be kind of a big deal. And dude, since then, I just feel super lucky to have started 5 software companies, exited the last 3, invested in 38 companies as an angel investor, traveled the world. Now I coach dozens and dozens of SaaS founders scaling and growing to get the same results. And I don't know, man, like I don't take for granted that, 20 years ago, I was that kid and just crazy stuff. So I just feel super blessed and grateful to be here alive today.
It's a crazy story, and I'm definitely glad the gun didn't jam on you back when that happened almost 20 years ago. So I was really curious when you were in that rehab program, and so that's kind of when you did discover the computer programming, as you said. And I mean, was there anything that kind of change in trajectory where you went from the downward spiral to kind of taking your life to where you are now? Was it really just, as you said, replacing one addiction with another, like a negative one with a positive one? Or was there any other?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, the replacement was kind of a nice benefit, but the truth is that can hurt a lot of people, right? A lot of people that, quit smoking cigarettes end up putting on 30, 40 pounds because they just replace it with eating, right? So it's not a positive thing. I think, there's this term we learn about being a sober alcoholic. Like some people can actually quit drinking, but still have all the bad habits and tendencies and characteristics of an alcoholic. So for me, what I learned the most was a lot of stuff. One, I learned how to deal with my feelings. I think too many people are very reactive to the world, right? Like you hear this very often in personal development. It's not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens to you that matters, right? Like same action, same environment. I might decide to go down one path and get angry. The other person would just literally not even faze them, right? Like you see these people in morning traffic where they're like, they get to work and they're just like, I can't believe it. Some guy cut me off, blah, 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 blah. Dude, if somebody cuts me off, it's like, it doesn't even register because in the grand scheme of what's important to me, that's not, right? I'm working on big multi-million-dollar deals. Like I could care less about being late or earlier. I'm honestly, dude, it was a lot of stuff. It's attitude of gratitude, right? Like every morning we would start off with like a very structured meeting. And a big part of that was just like, really reminding ourselves what we're grateful for. Like every day I do gratitude reflections because to me, if I can't be grateful for the fact that my heart still beats, 100,000 times a day without me having to ask it to, or that I got to wake up and put my feet on the ground and enjoy the day and spend it with my family and be here with you. Like that to me is like, I don't know. So I think there's just a lot of stuff that the people who created this program really understood the concepts of Maslow's hierarchy of needs and like basic values and, a lot of psychology, but it was the feelings management stuff. It was, learning how to tell your story and kind of rewrite your narrative. Because I think a lot of us tell ourselves stories that are either, because this is what's always fascinated me, James, is how do people go through things like I went through? And dude, like while I was in my program, 11 months, I probably seen 180 kids come through and leave, right? So one scenario, you got me who decides to, okay, I'm going to own this. Accountability, that's another thing. 100% accountability, like extreme accountability. Okay, I learned at 17 years old. So there's people like me that go through a lot of challenges and trauma, et cetera, and then I come out the other end with kind of like a growth mindset, and then other people that don't even finish or continue to have kind of a fixed mindset. And it's the same scenario where you see people that have PTSD, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder, from moments that happen to them. And then there's the same people, same moments, end up having post-traumatic growth disorder, right? Like you said, instead of spiraling down, they spiral up. And I still haven't figured out the answer to why that is. All I've figured out is what are the habits that allows me today to continue to evolve and grow. Because I'll tell you one thing, James, Dan Martell from a year ago is not the Dan Martell sitting in front of this camera. And it's not going to be the same Dan Martell in a year, because my growth game is strong. It has been. It doesn't slow down. To me, it's not something you do for a little bit and stop. It's just part of living and giving, and I owe my life, and you know, it's you know, sometimes I'm involved in many of the fundraisers for the organization, and my dad speaks, and man, it when he gets on stage and just thanks Portage for saving his son and giving him another chance, it's just like the most beautiful thing ever. So, you know, a lot of people ask me why I do these podcasts, why I do a YouTube show, why do I keep giving back? And I just feel like somebody was looking out, man, and I'd be disrespecting them in a big way if I didn't do what little I could to help others.
Yeah, I love it. That's powerful. And yeah, I'm glad we may not know exactly why some people do continue to go down and why some continue up as you did, but I'm glad you went on the up path, and that's great. How do you actually look back on your youth now? Because do you see that as kind of, that was just a stage you had to go through, like the drugs and all the issues you had, to become the successful person you are today and do all the things you're doing? Was that just something you had to go through? Do you look back on it as not a positive thing, but something that you're glad happened? Or how do you kind of reflect when you look back?
Dude, I am crazy grateful I went through that. You know what I mean? And I think that's the big, like, what are some of the big belief shifts that I've had is just the gratitude. Like, look, my mom's did the best she could with what she knew in her environment, etc. She didn't have personal development in her world. She didn't have supportive peers. She grew up in an alcoholic family as a adopted child. Like, I mean, my mom is somebody that's still very much part of my life, and I love her. You know what I mean? And I'm grateful that she was the person she was so that I could become the person I became. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think too often people wish that things didn't happen. And the way I flip it is, I just wish that I'm the kind of person that can deal with those problems. So if anything, I became the kind of person that could have those things happen to me and continue to use that as a fuel source for growth, not as an excuse for mediocrity, right? Not as an excuse for not being able to, not as an excuse for my deficits from a character point of view, et cetera. Like, I use that as, I'm the way I am today. I'm super driven. I am extremely tenacious. I attack problems with ferocity. I wouldn't beat mental toughness. Like, I do CrossFit. I've been to the CrossFit Games as a spectator. I have competed, and I believe that a lot of that mental toughness was developed as, you know, that kid going through just the shit, dude, that I don't even share about. Just the things that I seen that nobody should ever see. Being able to go through that and come out the other end is really just, in many ways, a confidence booster to know, like, it'll never get that bad ever again. Like, this is the crazy. People are like, damn, why are you such a risk taker, right? Many times in my life, I went all in, self-funding the next company, taking everything I made in the first company, pouring it back in, right? Investing in other companies, real estate projects, like just boom. And people go, why are you such a risk taker? And I go, the worst scenario that my life could look like, even with 2 kids and my wife, and obviously I wouldn't want them to have to to go through pain. But at the same time, I'm not trying to shelter them from anything either. Like if we do, we do, and who cares? The worst scenario is I ask my brother or my sister or my other brother if I can crash on their couch for 2 months max. That's like even the worst, because I'm pretty sure I could call any one of my friends, okay? Because this is the other thing. When you invest in relationships and you're down, they'll be there. I could call any one of my friends, no matter what scenario happened to me, and they would support me and whatever. So I probably wouldn't even need to call my brother to sleep on their couch, because I'd call a friend to borrow some money to keep going, to build the next thing. Because this is the cool part about growth and personal growth, is that these are characteristics, skill sets, belief systems, habits that you get to take with you for the rest of your life. So when people are like, I always find it weird when they're like, man, they're like, how did you do it, Dan? I say, well, a lot of things. I read a lot of books. So if you're going to start somewhere, go get this book. And they email me back, $35. Is it really worth $35? I'm like, wow, you are not ready for this, because to me, if anything, I wish I would have started reading a lot sooner, because the compound effect of knowledge, of becoming the person who can deal, of having more tools to deal with situations and more creativity. I just think that that's the coolest part of all this, right? I'm just lucky. Like when people say like, man, you've done so much in 20 years, because there was a 10-year period where I started, so between the ages of 24 and 34, I started Spheric Technologies, built, scaled that, became a millionaire at 27, exited at 28. Then I did Flowtown, raised venture capital, scaled that up, exited to a company we sold a few months later for $550 million. Then I did Clarity, right? From zero, 1.6 million in funding. Mark Cuban was an investor, grew that up to hundreds of thousands of calls per month. 2 years later, get acquired. In a 10-year period, I built and scaled and exited 3 years. Okay. And I share that because I truly believe that most people don't understand how dramatically different their life can look like in a 10-year period. Okay. Like dramatically different. And if you're not willing to invest $35 on day one for the possibility of something incredible in the future, then I just think you don't want it. You truly you're one of my mentors, John Assaraf. He wrote a book called The Answer. He was in The Secret. Great Canadian that lives down in San Diego. I spend my winters in San Diego. And I was having dinner with him recently, and I heard him share this story, but I wanted to ask. And one of the first things his mentor taught him, in his early 20s, 21-year-old kid, was, are you interested or committed to achieving your outcomes, your goals? Like interested or committed, those are two different things, right? And I just think there's too many people who are just interested in it and not committed.
Yeah, makes total sense. There's a lot you said there that resonated with me. I think don't wish it was easier, just wish you were better is a key point. Investing in relationships and your brain as well. If you're not willing to spend $35 on a book, whatever can you hope to achieve? And then also realizing that you can achieve a lot in a decade. People often overestimate what they can achieve in 1 year and underestimate what they can achieve in a decade. So I totally agree with all that. And I was wondering as well, there's an interesting story I read up about you when you spent a week with Richard Branson. So I was wondering if you could just tell that story, because I think that also highlights a key point about relationships and giving without expectation in return. So could you just share that story about how that came about?
Yeah, so it's crazy. Just so you guys all know, I still have to pinch myself sometimes. Some of the things that have happened in my life. When I started reading books when I was about 23, I think I came across Richard's book, Screw It, Let's Do It, or something like that, or Live Virgin, blah, blah, blah. Really early on, right? So like, obviously it's somebody I looked up to. Fast forward, 8 years later, I get an email from my buddy Dan. He was a founder of a company called Zozy. And he asked me, hey, I'm getting a group of guys together to spend a week at Richard's house in Switzerland. Would you be interested? So I don't know about you, man, but I'm like, I grew up in a small town in Eastern Canada. My brain exploded. I'm living in San Francisco at the time. And the answer was, what weeks? I'm sure I could clear my schedule, like, right? And then, is there a cost? Like, is this going to cost me $100,000? And it was crazy. And he goes, no, there's not really a cost. You just, you obviously got to cover your own expenses. Richard's an old friend. He's actually an advisor and investor in Zozy, and he asked me to put together a group of people that are supporting entrepreneurship in the world. And I know you're doing some work with Clarity that's really building out an incredible entrepreneurial community, and I think he would really enjoy meeting you. And here's the crazy part, James. The reason that even came up 4 years earlier, even before that, let's call it 8 years earlier, I read a book called Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi, right? And that book, and people don't understand this. Back then, I was more introverted, programmer, didn't want to talk to people, a little insecure, had a history, and I just resonated with code, right? And then started a company, failed, started another company, failed, and realized like the big challenge I had is I didn't understand how to work with people, right? I didn't understand that there was value in reaching out to people that were also doing similar things to me so I can learn faster. Like all these things were foreign ideas to me growing up. And I read Keith's book, and I'm like, man, this guy's crazy doing workouts with business associates and like spin classes and cold emailing people. And I was just like, wow. But, the one thing that I figured I could try was organizing meals. And so I remember the first meal, it wasn't even a group, it was just an individual. It was one of my partners at the time, I was building Spheric. And I remember emailing and said, hey, I'm in New Jersey next week. Just wondering if you're free on Wednesday for dinner. He was the owner of probably at the time a $30-40 million a year company. We were doing like $1 million or something. And I just thought like he's built what I want to kind of aspire to. And surprising enough, I didn't think he would reply, let alone say yes. He said, yeah, sure, Dan. Sounds like fun. And man, I was so nervous. I mean, sitting in the parking lot an hour before, prepping my notes, making sure I didn't say anything stupid, had my questions ready. And that just led me on, like afterwards, it just blew my mind how much I learned, how incredibly generous they were, how much they appreciated the fact that I reached out, that I picked up the bill. Like that just got me on this thing where today I organize founder dinners everywhere as I go. Every city I land in, I either do a breakfast, a dinner, or a lunch. Dude, I do workouts, all the stuff Keith talks about. I eventually ended up actually working with Keith, helping him on a tech startup of all things. So talk about full circle. And the reason I share that is because when I moved to San Francisco in 2008, I didn't know a soul, and I used meals as a way to build a network. So I would go to an event, I'd meet people, and I'd invite them to a meal. So twice a week, I'd organize dinners, and pretty much every day for lunch, I'd try to fill up 2 or 3 people. And it was at one of those early dinners where a friend that had been to a previous dinner recommended his friend from New York, Dan, he's like, hey, he just moved here, he doesn't know many people. Would you be cool inviting him to one of your dinners so you get to know people? Turns out he met some of his early friends and business worker guys at the dinner I invited him to, and he appreciated it so much that he always thought, man, Dan's just a good dude. Because I asked him, I said, you could have invited anybody. Why would you invite me? And we became internet friends, and for 4 years, I didn't see him. We talked on social media. You know how there's those people in your life where you're just like really pumped for their success and they're supporting you, and maybe see them quickly at events. And it was because of that dinner that I got an invite to hang out with Richard Branson. So I'm just telling you, I think sometimes the world rewards courageous decisions. And if people listening have ever been sitting on sending that email, like James, you reached out to me, man. Do you know that there's probably 1,000 people that think of inviting me to do their podcast that don't, right? So you reached out, you asked, and I just think if anybody's listening and says, man, I've been sitting on this idea, or this person came to mind, I really believe the universe brings ideas into our minds that we should take action on, right? And if you ever read Elizabeth Gilbert's book, Big Genius, I think it's called, she argues this point, right? That the universe or source brings ideas to people and will bug you for a little bit of time. And then if you don't do anything with it, it'll give it to the next person. And that's why often you'll see an idea and you'll go, I had that exact same idea. And that's what happens is you had it, and then, Big Magic said, no, I'll give it to somebody who's going to take action on it. So all that to say, it wasn't until the morning of, I'm in Switzerland at this incredible house, AKA lodge, 16 bedrooms, 20 staff, beautiful place. And Richard walks in the living room that I realized this was really going to happen. And to this day, that week would probably be in the top 5 moments that shaped my thinking and life ever.
Wow. And it all came about because you were just helping someone?
To break bread and talk about life.
It's amazing. It's a cool story. And you're absolutely right. It's surprising what the responses you get when you reach out to people. I've definitely found that myself, and it sounds like you did early in your career as well. So I think it's a great story that people can take a lot of value from. So thank you for sharing. So something else I was curious about was that most startups do fail, and you've founded 5 companies, 3 of them you've exited, as you said before. So you're obviously doing something right. So I was wondering if you had given much thought to, I guess, are there any things that you're doing differently to most people that you can attribute to that success? Have you ever really tried to break it down like that?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I coach a lot of SaaS founders, and one of the things that, one of a few things I do for them is really give them the strategies for growth, right? And I kind of break it down into 4 core pillars. It's a framework called ACES Growth Engine: attract, convert, expand, and scale, right? So, lead generation, sales conversion, product expansion, revenue optimization, that kind of stuff. And then scale is really about like building the operating system of the business, right? The OS. For every company, it's got a different, there's no one template. So it's tough to say what have I seen that all these companies have in common, because the cool part is success can be done 1,000 different ways, right? But if you said what's required, are you saying in software in general or just in business in general?
In business in general.
Yeah. So in business in general, it's really straightforward. It's, and you look, I like reading books about the wealthiest people, the biggest companies, because I think sometimes people make decisions early on small businesses that if their ambition is to build big, then it actually hurts them because they're not thinking there, right? So that being said, what do they do right? One, they have a very clear customer who they serve. I can't tell you how often I talk to an entrepreneur and I say, well, who's your ideal customer? And they say small businesses. And I go, that's cool. If that's your answer, then nobody is your ideal customer and you're confusing the market. And they're like, what are you talking about? They think I'm rude. I'm like, no, it's just dude, your customer can't be every small business. Because it's there's something your ideal customer. The way I think about an ideal customer is if I met them 8 out of 10 times, I'm going to get them as a customer. Right? So unless you're closing 80% of your sales conversations, and you haven't figured out the answer to that question. So that's number 1, is they understand exactly who their ideal customer is. Number 2, they create at least 3 times more value for the price they charge than what the customer receives, right? So the ROI is huge. That way it makes it self-evident, right? If you can't prove a really great ROI and value from what you offer, and it's not about being the cheapest, right? It's just being the one that solves the problem the best. Here's what I mean. If I'm selling cement, okay? Cement's a commodity. If all I do is sell cement, then I'm essentially going to be responding to quotes all day long about my cost per pound of cement. And if I got a lot of cement I got to move, I'm going to discount it more than if I only have a little bit, I'll keep the prices up, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas what I do with clients in software and many of my friends, I've actually invested in a bunch of companies that are non-tech just because I love business. But what I've always said is, what's the value look like? What problem are you trying to solve? What customer, they're not buying cement, James, right? They're buying cement to solve a problem. What's the problem they're trying to solve? How can you create more value for them into that problem than anybody else in the world? So for example, maybe they're buying cement to pour a foundation for a building. All right, well, what else do they might need? They might need the blocks, right? They need to build the walls and the retaining system, et cetera. They might need an engineering drawing. They might need to rent certain tools. So instead of just thinking about selling the thing you do, sell the full solution, but package it in a way that's very easy for them to buy. So that's a big idea that I think a lot of first-time entrepreneurs don't think about. And then the third thing is I say they don't. Well, there's a bunch of stuff, dude. I could talk for days on that, but I'll do two more because I think they're important. The third one is they don't productize their services, right? So it's easy in software because software is inherently a product. Okay, it's easy in e-commerce because you're selling a widget, right? You're selling a bottle of water, you're selling an iPhone. It's the product. But in services, you need to productize it, meaning that you need to say, this is what we do. We have 3 packages. They're priced like this. And here's how it works. We do this. There's the amount of calls. And this is the result you get. And essentially, you're productizing the outcome. You're not selling the hours, right? So that's a huge mistake. And you can just Google value-based pricing and you'll see, like, as soon as you peg the outcome to hours worked, then you've missed the opportunity. And then the fourth thing I'm going to say, James, is leverage, right? So here's the equation for success that nobody explained to me that I wish I would have learned at 17. Okay. Number one, we trade time for money. Make sense? People that have a job, they go work, they get money. Entrepreneurs do the exact same thing. If you're freelancing, getting paid $80 an hour to write, code, you're just trading time for money. It just might be more money than you would get as a job, right? But it's the same trade. At some point, you realize you need to get leverage. You need to hire other people or hire contractors or work with teams or outsource stuff. And that's where we start trading money for time, right? We take some money and we buy back time. Make sense, James?
Makes sense.
Right? But then most people stop there. This is the third level is we start trading money for money. And that is where true wealth is created. And that is how the world works. And I got lucky when I was 26 that I had a company come to me for advice that I thought was interesting, and I decided to invest because I had running a service business. We were doing probably $2 million at the time. Had a lot of cash, and I was super frugal. Like, dude, people thought I was poor for a long time, and I was making millions of dollars. And that's my wife. When she first met me, I was living in San Francisco. I had roommates and no car, and she thought, oh, Dan's a struggling startup founder. Little did she know. And I love that because to me, I just kept reinvesting. But what I learned back then by accident, and I did, dozens of times since, was how do you take capital that you've generated and invested in other thing and return, so most of the world's wealth has been made in real estate. That's very well documented. But really just the idea of having money work for you. So I just think that idea of leverage is one that a lot of founders have a hard time with for their ego. They don't know how to manage people. They don't know how to give direction. They don't know how to delegate. They don't know how to create systems. And because of that, they're always going to be stuck, and you can be well paid. I've got neighbors around, actually my neighbor right next door, he's a plastic surgeon. He makes a lot of money, but if he doesn't go do the operation, he don't get paid.
Yep.
So
makes total sense.
You gotta understand that equation.
That's great. Wow, there's a lot of value there, and I love all those points. Get clear on who your customer is. You should be closing most of your customers you talk to because they are the right fit for your service. Provide 3 times more value than what you're charging. Make sure you're actually solving a problem. Productize that service, and then learn how to leverage money, trade money for money. So all awesome tips that thank you very much for sharing. So sort of coming up on time here, I want to be mindful of your time. So just a few quick questions here for you, Dan. I just want to know what's next for you. What are you currently working towards, and what's coming up for you for the rest of this year?
Yeah. The thing for me is I'm not a guy that likes to talk about what I'm going to do. I just do it and then tell people what I've done. So I think a lot of people teach about stuff they've never done. They talk about stuff that they haven't done. I'm kind of like, I don't talk about that. I'll share what I've done. I'll share what I'm doing. But I will say this, like, a lot of people ask, like, Dan, why didn't you build another software company after you exited your last one? The truth is I had 2 little boys. Max and Noah, they're 5 and 6 today. Building a venture-backed company, I don't care who you are, and I coach 30% of my coaching clients are funded venture-backed. I mean, I coach the founder of ClickFunnels, 0 to 5, and they're bootstrapped, but 0 to 100 million in revenue in 5 years. Trust me, there's a lot to get right to make that work. But a lot, and it just wasn't what I wanted to, because I got good at trading money for money. You know what I mean? So it's like I didn't need to build another company. And I started doing YouTube videos for free, still do today. I've done over 200 episodes every week for the last 3.5 years. So everybody can check that out. 100% free. My best strategies, 98% of everything I know, I give it away. And it was through that I just got a lot of people reaching out for coaching. So I did that with no expectations. Here's the funny part. In doing that, I built a system to get software founders incredible results. And it's repeatable and it's scalable and it works for all 3 different types of like SMB, mid-market, enterprise software companies. I only do B2B. I don't do consumer. So essentially I built this playbook, right? Like, I mean, it's if you've seen it, it's overwhelming for a lot of my clients. But what we do is we pick and choose the right strategies for them. They go implement and get results. And what I'm interested in exploring in the future that I haven't made a decision on is how to leverage that to build kind of the next portfolio of companies that I'm involved in. So right now I've got a ton of companies like you mentioned, Intercom and Udemy, and a bunch of really cool founders, GetAround, et cetera, that I'm an investor in. So I support them. I've got my group of founders that are coaching clients that come to me that are bootstrapped. They're never going to raise money. So other than that, I wouldn't be able to work with them, and they want the same strategies that my funded companies get. And then there's kind of like an opportunity for me to, instead of building from scratch, and I don't know, man. Like that's the cool part. I'm young, man. I'm going to be building companies till I'm 100, right? Like, I don't know. But right now, just so everybody knows, SaaS Academy is a multi-million-dollar coaching business. Like I've got a team of 10 people that run the operations, right? Like I'm a builder. I create. To me, it's weird meeting a business coach that doesn't run a business, right? I run several businesses and I coach, and my coaching business has grown, double every year for the last 2.5 years. It's just like boom, 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 boom. So I think there's something there. It'll definitely be in software. It's my love. It's my passion. It's what I know best. It's where I can get people results the fastest. And all I know is the future is exciting as heck. And if you've been impressed with anything I've done so far, and it's still, look, man, I'm super grateful, but that's nothing compared to what I've got going on in the next 20 years. So I'm just getting going.
I love it. And that's the great thing about entrepreneurship. You only get better as you get older. It's not like sports where you kind of peak and then you're done. So,
dude, check this out. As a guy, yesterday my father-in-law looked at me and said, "Hey, Dan, you're getting a little bit of like some tingles of gray. You look distinguished." I go, "Isn't that awesome? I get older, I look more trustworthy." Right? I think that's awesome. Like the older I get, the more sage and wise I might look. And I still feel like an 18-year-old inside, but man, I think that's the coolest part is all that stuff we've learned, we get to apply to the next thing, right? And the next set of challenges. So yeah, I'm pumped.
That's awesome. Well, coming up on the end here, so thanks so much for everything, Dan. I just want to know, is there anything I haven't asked you or anything you just really want to make sure you pass on to the audience here today?
Well, if anybody's listening and they feel like, connected to my story or anything that I've shared so far, feel free to please come over to YouTube, subscribe to my channel. I publish every Monday. Every 2 weeks, I just started a new video podcast show called Escape Velocity, interviewing other, eight-figure, nine-figure SaaS founders. And Instagram, man, I'm posting on Instagram every day, just trying to share as much as I can back to the community. So if I can help inspire, motivate, or excite you to take your business to the next level, come hang out, come talk, and find me over there. It's just Dan Martell, 2 L's of Martell, on all social media platforms of your choice. And James, I really appreciate you having me on today, man. It's a real honor.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dan. And guys listening, go check out all his stuff. He's got some great YouTube videos. There was a few that I really loved talking about SaaS metrics and how to identify and connect with the right mentors in your city. Those are two videos that stood out for me. So he's putting out a ton of great content. He knows what he's doing, as you can tell from the past 45 minutes. So Dan, thank you very much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Really appreciate it, man. We'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks everyone for listening to the interview today with Dan Martell. I hope you got a lot of value from it. I certainly did, from even just interviewing him. So if you've made it this far, I've got a real quick favor to ask. If you're listening on an iOS device, if you're using iTunes, Apple Podcasts, please leave me a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. And the reason for that is because it really helps with the show credibility and to build the show audience and help more people discover it if there's a lot of ratings and reviews. So if you could do that, it only takes 5 seconds. I'd really appreciate that. It would mean the world. And even if you're not on an Apple device, if you're listening on Spotify, for example, you can just screenshot your phone while you're listening to the interview and then just post that on Instagram stories, tag me in that. And doing any of those things would really mean the world. So thanks so much. Again, hope you enjoyed it and have a great day.